Welcome back, everybody. Jeff here, and Malifaux 4th Edition is super duper exciting. We are getting all sorts of news, and the open beta just dropped recently, so most of you are probably out there tearing through all the rules, looking through all the crews that are available, and checking out all the hot, new, good stuff. But what I want to talk about today is how this new edition of the game is going to affect the lore. Now, one of the really interesting things that dropped when Weird was releasing their news articles last week was that we are going to be getting faction books this time around again. Now, if you don't remember, in 3rd edition, when it was brand new, the 7, at the time, factions each got their own rulebook. And it was a huge influx of lore, because each one of those rulebooks had 3 stories in it. And then the following year, of course, the Explorer Society came out, and that book came with 4 stories. Now, that's really cool because for the last couple of years, we've pretty much only gotten one new story every year. When the trilogy, the kind of Burning Man trilogy, those books would come out and they would have basically one story in them. It was kind of like a bunch of stories conglomerated together, but there wasn't a ton of variety. It really focused on a handful of specific characters. So the news that we're going to be getting faction books again this time around was really exciting for me, because not only does that mean we're going to hear from some characters who we haven't heard from in a while and get like a wider variety of characters in the stories, but it also means we're going to get a huge influx of stories again. If they do a book for every faction, even if they only have 2 stories, that's going to be a ton of stuff. We haven't seen an influx of lore like that since the last time they did the faction books, and now we'll even have the Explorer Society, so it'll be 8 altogether. Now, a couple of things that are going to be interesting in those stories is they're probably going to address a lot of things like why certain masters are abandoning one of their factions if they were dual faction before, why people like Bass are switching factions altogether and going over to the Arcanists, and even maybe why some of the models within keywords are getting moved around. They tend to like to have little nods and winks to those types of things in the story, so I'm really looking forward to the explanation of why a lot of those sort of shared models switch to one side or the other and all that good stuff. When they announced that the dual faction masters were all going to one faction, we got a very short explanation for why that was, and I think I'm going to do a separate video to go through all of those and give my opinion on some of the explanations that they give and my thoughts on where those things might be going in the story. But I very much expect that with the new faction books coming, they are going to explain all of that. Each one of those characters is probably going to get its own dedicated story to explain the switch of faction, which is exactly what they did in 3rd edition. Plus, of course, our boy Leviticus, he's going the way of the dodo. Rest in peace, I guess? I don't know. But we'll probably get a whole story that explains what happens to him with Hamlin, because we got that little cliffhanger at the end of Ashes of Malifaux, and we're going to kind of figure out what's up with him and how Alice takes over, of course. Now, one of the reasons that I was predicting that there was going to be a new edition coming soon was because in the lore, we were kind of at a turning point where we just resolved this whole trilogy of stories about the Burning Man's kind of rise to power and then his kind of fading back into obscurity, kind of. So this is an opportunity for them to bring out another big bad or start developing another larger storyline for the sort of A-plot. And I have some thoughts on what that might be. Now, there's a couple of tyrants that we haven't really heard a lot from, and one of them was Witness, but recently, of course, Damien gotten mixed up with Witness, and she seems to be in his head, and shockingly, he seems to still kind of be in control, but Witness will probably be some part of the ongoing storyline here, but I don't think she's going to be the big bad. Another one that I think it could be would be the Gorgon, because the Gorgon has never really had a really important role in the lore. The Gorgon has been inside the Gorgon's tier, and it's currently sitting in Seamus's forehead, but we've never really gotten a good indication of what the Gorgon is up to or what she wants. She seems to have some strange motives, and I would be curious to find out more about her, but I don't think she's going to be the next big bad either. The next one would probably be the Dragon. Now, a lot of people, especially in my community, really want to see the Black Dragon in the Bayou, which is where the other half of the dragon that's not in Shenlong is currently hanging out. And she seems like an interesting character because she's a human that's possessed by half of a tyrant and is kind of manipulating and teaching the gremlins about a particularly weird kind of magic that's like necromantic, and there's all kinds of weird stuff going on over there, and that will be something that would be super interesting, but that doesn't strike me as big bad energy. That strikes me as kind of secondary or minor character energy. And maybe it's because she's in the Bayou, and we all know that the Bayou is not allowed to be important in the lore. So the one that I think is almost certainly going to be the next big bad is Meridian. Now, if you don't know who Meridian is, you should check out some of the videos that I did on the sort of ancient Malifaux story and kind of the Tyrant War and all that kind of good stuff. I'll leave a link up there in the cards as well as down below. But Meridian was a tyrant who was associated with the Sirens, which were a kind of fae who lived on the coast of the continent down where the Bayou currently is. And they also inhabited places like the Sunken City, which we've had kind of cropping up in the lore here and there over the last couple of years as well. Now, not only do we get a little hint at the end of Ashes of Malifaux that Meridian is sort of stirring because she was actually imprisoned in the ley lines, which is where she draws her power from. They tended to imprison the tyrants in something that would hurt them if they were to destroy the cage, so they were kind of using their own power against them in a weird way. But whatever shenanigans the Burning Man got up to when he was kind of destroyed-ish or scattered seems to have woken Meridian to an extent. Now, the other interesting thing about Meridian is that Meridian has some level of control over the Gibbering Hordes, which are a faction in the other side. And we even have characters like the Storm Siren, who is a descendant of the ancient Sirens. But in Malifaux, we've also gotten some sort of slight references to things that have to do with Meridian in the form of the Banished, who showed up in the story where Lilith ultimately kind of gets thrown in the pit to save her life. At the very beginning of that story, she actually went to try to recruit the Banished to her side. The Banished are a sect of the former followers of Meridian and the Sirens. And she went to try to recruit them to her side, which was Zoraida's idea. But of course, Lilith showed up, and the Banished weren't super happy about that because they had beef with the Neverborn, and they ended up just getting slaughtered by Lilith. But Lilith is gone now, so maybe that won't be a problem anymore. And I suspect that that might be the case because the word Banished might sound familiar to you because Weird also recently showed a list of all of the keywords that are going to be available for every faction in 4th edition of Malifaux, and Banished is one that did not exist in 3rd edition. The Banished are going to be a crew for the Neverborn, and I very much suspect that we're going to get a whole story that kind of explains what their involvement is in the rest of the Malifaux story once those faction books drop. Now, on the subject of brand new things, we also got another new keyword that was shown for the Outcast this time, and that is Ampersand. Now, this is one that I have been asking for a really long time. You may have heard me talk about it in past videos that I thought that it needed to kind of be brought more into the lore because it's a super interesting aspect of the lore, but we only really got little hints and bits and pieces here and there about it, but it looks like they're going to be coming to Malifaux as a full crew now, which is super exciting. If you're enjoying this video and you want to support the channel, then there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. The first would be to pick up some merchandise through my merch store. You can grab a t-shirt, a hoodie, a mug, a sticker, all sorts of cool stuff like that. You can also shop using my affiliate links, so if you're going to make any purchases from any of these companies, you can use the links in the description below to make your purchases, and it will go directly to supporting the channel at no extra cost to you. There's also a link for my Ko-fi if you would just like to give me a tip, or my Patreon if you want to support me longer term. I have a bunch of different tiers there, and there are all sorts of benefits available to people, such as early access to videos, ad-free videos, the opportunity to vote in polls about upcoming content, and extra entries into the giveaways that I run occasionally. But if none of that is your cup of tea, no problem at all. Just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and leave a like on the video. It actually helps a tremendous amount. And if you want to go the extra mile, then consider sharing the video out with some friends who you think might find it interesting. The YouTube algorithm is not kind to small YouTubers, so that helps a whole bunch. Other than that, consider joining the Discord, also linked in the description, where you can come and hang out with me and the rest of the community and talk games. But with that, let's get right back to the video. Ampersand is this little town to the sort of northwest of Malifaux that is hidden from the guild, and apparently the guild is really eager to find it. Now, that's because the guild just is power hungry and wants to know everything, but also this particular town is inhabited by constructs. And in particular, it's constructs who have sort of abandoned their roles as servants to humans, mostly to the guild, and they have sort of sought out their own life living independently under their own rule as opposed to the human rule. A lot of the constructs who are there are very resentful towards the guild, which is very exciting. I always love to see more people joining the fight against the guild. And there's actually already a handful of characters in the game who have an association with Ampersand. So first of all, of course, you have Lazarus, and that's the story where we sort of originally heard about Ampersand, and Von Schill actually goes there. But Lazarus got recruited and kind of joined up with the Freikorps, and it's unclear whether Lazarus is going to be part of that crew or not. And the other character who has an interesting nod to Ampersand is the 6-armed 6-shooter. The 6-armed 6-shooter is a construct that actually kind of wandered into Ampersand and hung out there for a while, got some repairs and got tuned up, and then eventually was kind of involved with LMA Chesterfield, and they decided to go off and do their own thing. Now, I think it would be cool if those characters got involved in an Ampersand keyword, but it seems like they probably won't because they already have 2 keywords, and we haven't seen any 3 keyword models in the past. But maybe the Ampersand crew will have an ability that lets them just hire any constructs. I don't know. There's a lot of opportunities there, but I'm super excited to see another keyword that is robot focused because I just lost Hoffman from Team Blue, and I'm super curious to see what the Ampersand crew ends up looking like. Now, on the subject of new stuff, I recently got a hold of some new art for Malifaux 4th edition, so I thought I would show that off to you guys because we can confirm the identity of a couple of the bits from the trailer that originally dropped announcing 4th edition Malifaux. So this bird here is in fact the Strix, which is going to be the totem for the second version of Euripides, which is very cool. I really like this art. It's very interesting looking. There's definitely a unique style to the stuff that we've seen so far for 4th edition, and I know some people are not as hot on it as others, but aside from the fact that some people look a little too skinny, I think the style is really interesting and cool. We also found out that this guy with the giant gat is, in fact, the Union Journeyman, which is very strange and interesting and surprising, but I'm excited. I guess if you really look at it, it does look more like a piece of machinery or a pneumatic weapon of some sort rather than a traditional gun. But either way, excited to see what Tony's getting added to her crew because we just lost the miners and the steam fitters. And in exchange, we're getting these guys. There was a lot of conversation after the trailer dropped about who this character was because she kind of looks like Fiona Gage. She's got the weapon and the kind of metallic skull, and I can confirm that that is in fact Fiona. She definitely looks a little bit more tidied up and kind of straight-laced than she used to, but I'm sure she'll still kick some ass and she'll still have a lot of fun, but I think Nellie's been influencing her more than maybe we expected. Now, this isn't news, but I did just want to show these two pieces of art because Sandeep and Kudra both got a bit of a glow up here, and I think both of them look absolutely awesome. I'm super excited about these guys. This is a new version of a Sorrow for the Pandora crew, and it looks like we're just getting a resculpt and a slightly different style for these. They look a little bit more like traditional ghosts, which I think is kind of interesting, but you can still see that kind of telltale green glow underneath, so of course they still go right along with the Pandora crew. This model is actually going to be a Stolen, and that's really interesting to me because the Stolen are supposed to be children, so I don't know what's going on here, if this is just a big kid or if they're deformed or something, but it's definitely different and interesting, and it kind of reminds me of some of those trick-or-treating kids from the Nightmare or Rotten Harvest box last year. I forget which one it was. Probably Rotten Harvest. A lot of the other stuff that I have here is pretty self-explanatory and is just different versions of existing models, but I think they're pretty easy to guess. But the last one that I wanted to talk about is this here, because this is in fact Mara, who is being added to the December keyword. If you missed the video that I did right around the time of the launch alongside Weird, I did go through and list out a whole bunch of new models that were going to be coming to the various keywords. And Mara was one that I noted, and she was particularly interesting. Now, I vaguely recalled there being a character named Mara, but for some reason I didn't bother to go digging through all of the lore to find out if she's actually an existing character. And huge shout out to Durkrishna3720, who pointed out that Mara is actually the name of a silent one from a story all the way back in 1st edition of Malifaux. The story is called Cold Hearted from Twisting Fates, and Mara is actually a silent one who kind of steps in when Rasputina is about to kill Joss and prevents her from doing so. And then she kind of helps him down the mountain. He, of course, loses an arm, but he does survive, and I'll be super curious to see what happens in the story with her because she leaves with him, so it didn't really seem like she stayed up in the Cult of December, but I guess she did because she's still in the keyword. Maybe this will give us a little bit of an explanation of why Rasputina is staying loyal to the Arcanists, loyal in quotations, I guess, if she ever really was. But with Joss going over to the MNSU keyword and working for Tony, I'm wondering how that relationship is going to evolve here. Now, that's a lot of exciting new stuff. I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on these books. It's going to be a lot of great reading, and I'm probably going to have to take some time off work to get through all of it, but I'm really excited to get my hands on it. What I would like to know from all of you, though, is get down in the comments and let me know what character do you hope to see show up in one of these stories in the new faction books. There's a lot of characters in the story who don't really get a lot of kind of airtime front and center or a POV story or anything like that. So who is on your wish list? Give me like a top 3 or top 5 characters that you really want to see get a full story that features them and kind of explains something about them. There's also a lot of characters who kind of used to be really important in the lore and have kind of faded into obscurity a little bit. And then there's a lot of characters who are newer and we've really never seen show up in the lore. So I definitely have my own wish list, but I'm really curious to see what everybody else thinks. Stay tuned because I have a lot more coming for Malifaux 4th edition. Not only did I do that announcement video partnering with Weird, but I also did an interview with Justin, who is the lead developer on Malifaux 4th edition. We talked a lot about some of the sort of design goals that they had in mind, as well as some issues like how to control game bloat and the kind of approach that they take to things like that. But I have a whole bunch of other ideas for things that I want to do in the very near future, so you won't want to miss it. And also be sure to check out all of the other Malifaux content creators out there. It's super important, especially right now, that we support everyone else who's doing awesome Malifaux content. I have been going through everything that everyone has been posting. There's podcasts, there's YouTube videos, there's all kinds of really good stuff coming out. Analysis of the new game rules. People are already going through keywords and talking about all kinds of cool stuff. So be sure to check out all of those things and make sure you go over and support all of those people doing cool stuff. And with that, I want to send a huge thank you to the Extremely Cool Kids tier on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, Dogmatized, Devin, Spanner Rider, Rob Younce, Dynat, and Tom Likely. And thanks for watching.